Alright, hello everyone, and welcome to our fifth video talking about Unit 1, Area Study 1 for VCE Economics, Thinking Like an Economist. Today we're going to start to move into the business side of behavior. We've looked at the consumer side before. There'll be another video coming soon that delves more into the modern view of consumer behavior. So although this is listed as lesson 5, there's probably going to be like a 4.8 or 4.1 in between these, going into that in a little bit more detail because I wasn't quite happy with how much was in the one that we currently have, with how interesting modern consumer behavior can be. But to get into business behavior, we're going to be looking at the key knowledge for it from Behaviour. So what we're looking at is the traditional economic viewpoint of business and the economy, which is about profit maximization. So we're going to be really focusing on that, what that means, what businesses do to try and achieve that on the traditional viewpoint. And then it kind of like moves into how businesses might respond to positive and negative incentives, a few examples of those, and then the evolution of business behavior and their changing goals. So why businesses now care about sustainability, community involvement, gender equality, innovation, and research and development. And then also kind of tying into that is the effect of technology on business behavior and how that's changed the way that businesses behave and operate over time. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So first up, business behavior. The general definition just looks at the factors which influence the decision-making of firms when choosing to produce goods and services. So what motivates businesses to produce the things they produce? So why do Apple make iPhones? Well, they're profitable, people want them, people demand them, people see them as not having an equal unless you like Android devices, which is a totally fine opinion. But people who buy iPhones only want iPhones. So Apple keeps making them, they keep increasing the prices, and that factor that influences them. There is consumer demand, and therefore they want to make it. They want profit maximization. Ties into this. The traditional view of businesses is that they want to maximize their profit, and they normally focus on two things to do this. They normally focus on maximizing revenue, so maximizing their sales, so enticing consumers to buy their products. So they do this through a few different things. One of the ways they do it is through advertising. Sometimes they do it through deals. Sometimes they do it through, well, these days it's really interesting to go a little bit forward into the modern view. Sometimes they do it through social media and tying in with influencers and things like that, which we will probably talk about in more detail later on because that's actually an interesting topic. But then they also try and do it through minimizing production costs. So being as efficient as possible to minimize spending on wages, resources, capital, and raw materials. So businesses do this because they want to maximize their output per unit of input. And we talk about that when we talk about in other topics, we talk about the word productivity in economics. So productivity, and productivity tends to generally mean output per unit of input. And you want that to be as high as possible. So sometimes they measure productivity in GDP per hour worked, which essentially means how much production is occurring per hour that each person is working. And businesses want that to be as high as possible. They don't want their staff just standing around doing nothing. They don't want machinery to be being left unused because they want to maximize their output. So businesses will do what they possibly can to minimize production costs. So an example of that, if you want to, one thing that has been done to minimize production costs, I use a couple of different examples, one being self-serve checkouts. If you look at self-serve checkouts, essentially in some places there's like up to 10 to 20 self-serve checkouts which are being looked after by one member of staff. And in the past, those 20 checkouts would have had 20 different operators on them. That's 20, that's just 10. And so that minimizes production costs because there's 19 people and now do not need to pay wages. So they are saving a significant amount of money when you think about per hour how much 19 staff members cost you, and then multiply that by hours in a day, days in a year. That could be millions of dollars saved that can maximize output. Another example of this, so when I was in high school and early university, I worked at McDonald's. I was sadly a manager at McDonald's for a while, but in the time I worked at McDonald's, there was originally a person whose role was they were just known as the drink drawer. So in drive-through, their job was to pour the drinks. So their whole job was the orders would come in, They'd fill up the drink with whatever drink it was, usually Coke. They'd be the person pouring those drinks and then serving them out to the people in their cars. And then eventually, as I draw a really crude cut, that's horrible, but not as horrible as I was expecting it to be. Then eventually, this human that was pouring these drinks, they got replaced. So that person no longer was needed in the workplace. So that person disappeared, and this machine that just had a robotic arm would pour all of the drinks, have them go along the conveyor belt, and just be ready at the drive-through window to hand out to the cars. And so this machine replaced someone and helped McDonald's minimize their production costs. And so that's a really effective tool. Like when you think about McDonald's, most McDonald's operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And therefore there's one machine in however many stores McDonald's have, which is probably in the thousands, if not tens of thousands. If they were paying, let's just say they're paying a teenager, so they're paying $15 an hour. If you look at $15 an hour by 24 hours in a day, by 365 days in a year, let's see what amount of money that would be for just one store. So if I got out my phone here and we did some math, so 15 times 24 times 365, that is $131,400 in savings per store, assuming that staff member was being paid $15 per hour. So if you think about that across the amount of stores that McDonald's has, that's a significant savings. So that's an example of firms minimizing their production costs to maximize output. Other ways that kind of time with profit maximization, it really depends on what market structure the firms sell in. So the level of competition in a market greatly impacts the profitability of a business. If you don't have any competition, you are going to be incredibly profitable because there is no competition. People don't have any other choice. Therefore, they have to buy from you. Therefore, because you're the only option, you are going to be able to charge high prices and be highly profitable as long as people want your goods or services. And then some things that can influence what businesses choose to produce are government rules, policies, and incentives. So if there are subsidies, taxes, and laws, these basically act as positive or negative incentives for businesses. There are certain laws in certain levels of types of production. There are subsidies for producing certain goods and services. So a subsidy is a payment given to a business which lowers their cost of production, motivating them to produce certain goods or services, e.g. solar panels. Taxes, if you want to produce like cigarettes, alcohol, socially undesirable goods, there usually is taxes on the production of it as well as the consumption. So they're trying to demotivate businesses from producing those. And then laws can negatively impact businesses and their production. Some safety laws mean that businesses won't create certain goods and services because it will cost them too much to line up with Australia's safety standards. So there's some things that can really impact how businesses produce or what they choose to produce. Another couple of things that can affect businesses and their behaviour are the activity of unions. So how much union activity there is in that kind of industry can really impact a business. Reports in the media. So if suddenly people really want certain things, that will drive businesses towards that level of production. Or if suddenly there's a big push against a certain type of production, people will move away from it. And then just the general community view of the business. If they're seen as a good part of the community, or if they're seen as a really negative part of the community, will affect that business's behaviour. And that kind of ties and leads us into the modern view of businesses that we'll look at in a moment. We're just going to look at a few questions generally first. So in general, how has the way businesses operate changed over the past 20 years? Hopefully, if you're thinking about that, well, there has been a giant push towards operating online or having an online presence. That didn't exist 20 years ago. Brick and mortar stores are slowly dying off. There's still a need for them. There's still a place for them in the retail atmosphere. But in terms of a lot of other things, having an online presence works a lot better for businesses because it allows them to minimize their production costs and have actually interaction with a far bigger market. Research and development has become really important to businesses, and we'll talk about that in a moment, because businesses need to be innovative to change in positive ways that are going to allow them to become more efficient. We have issues in Australia that our labour costs a lot. We have one of the highest minimum wages in the world, and therefore, to be competitive, we have to be really efficient to kind of cancel that out. Then lastly, how has the role of women in the workplace changed? Well, women can have roles in the workplace now, which was kind of not existent many, many years ago. They've slowly been able to get, there's more and more push for parity between men and women in the workplace to get rid of the gender pay gap and make sure that women have a chance to have seats in power in businesses, which is a very, very positive thing. But we'll talk about that more in a moment. So the evolution of business and changing goals. This is the modern view of business behavior that we're looking at now. So there is a new focus on sustainability. Businesses are trying to move away from using plastic, etc., that can negatively impact the environment. So if you see, there's been a wide-scale ban on plastic bags. That's been a government push, but that also affects businesses' behaviour. A lot of businesses start to use biodegradable packaging to show that they are being sustainable. There's a need for research and development and innovation, which we just talked about, a need for community involvement. So one of my favourite examples of this is Grilled. If you look at Grilled, when you buy a burger at Grilled, they give you a bottle cap. Well, they did before COVID times. And you put that bottle cap into a jar. Oh, that's a terrible jar. And that jar has a community initiative on it, and you choose who you want Grilled to give money to. And if that one has the most, they get money. It's an ingenious move by Grilled because it shows that Grilled cares about the local community that they're in, but also makes you feel good because you are physically making the choice. Grilled aren't just announcing they're giving money to a local community group, you are helping them decide, therefore you feel like you have some onus over that decision. And it's really smart because all of these things, the businesses might not necessarily care philosophically about these things, but by showing they care about it, it makes the community think they care and make them more willing to shop with them and potentially pay higher prices for it. So a lot of the time people are willing to pay more for a product that is sustainable because they know it's not going to have a negative impact on the environment in the long term. Example of this, so I have a 1-year-old daughter named Eleanor. She's adorable. We have been trying really hard to not get her plastic toys because plastic toys is bad for the environment and they cause a lot of waste. So there are a lot of companies now that are making wooden toys which are made with sustainable wood. They're made using ethical practices and they last for a long, long time. And although they cost a lot more, like painfully a lot more, and they're harder to come by, that focus on sustainability, and a lot of the businesses have really strong ethos towards doing the right thing in the community. That's really, really positive for us. And then lastly, gender equality is a massive thing that we still are a long way off fully achieving. Like women still don't have an equal role with men in the workplace. It's going to be a long, long push towards that. There are arguments towards either side. I'm very pro equality. But businesses are now starting to really adopt that more and making sure that there is representation by women at all levels of business, which is really good. The impact of technology. So consumers now have access to more information and choice than ever before in history. I gave this example in an earlier video about consumer behavior, but whenever I go to the shops, I have my phone with me. If I find something I want, I end up just Googling it in general to see if it's at a lower price elsewhere. So the internet has also led to more online businesses and working from home, even more so in 2020. Like this is really, really relevant in 2020. I have my pen the wrong way, that's why it's not working. So in 2020, this is massive. And there's going to be a big, big push that some businesses might not ever actually return to the workplace or might not ever return in a full capacity. So that's a really interesting thing. It might actually help businesses minimize some of their costs because they won't need as much office space. They might just need meeting spaces. Then there's also newer technology that's led to more efficient methods of production. So we keep, as we talked about earlier, the more new technology we implement, potentially the less labor we need, or just the more output we can get. The great thing about technology is it doesn't need, well, sometimes it needs breaks. It doesn't need as many breaks as a human. It can operate 24 hours a day, and therefore they can have a really positive impact on production overall. And then lastly, some strategies that a business might use to maximize their profitability. So there are things like ensuring operational excellence, so making sure they're the best. So So that could be high quality. Best? That's not best. Let me fix that up. So best. So that means highest quality. And if you have the highest quality, people are going to be willing to buy it and they're going to be willing to come back. Or the best service overall. So if you go to that store, you know you're going to get the best service. Knowing and developing good relations with customers. Sometimes they do this through loyalty systems. They might do it through rewarding customers for doing certain behaviors, or even just the way they communicate with them. Like I know my local cafe, they know my order straight away. So like when I come in, they say, "Hey Sean, how you doing?" And then like give me my like cold drip coffee because I'm a massive hipster. Um, that's really good because it makes me feel like they care about me and not just my money. And therefore it makes me want to go back, even though they do probably really care about my money because they want that, because it's really good for them as a business. But that's how they know and develop good relations, keeps people coming back. Actually, their product is technically superior, so it does things that other products do not do. That's going to maximize their profitability because people are going to buy it. And then another really sneaky one that a lot of people don't know about is multiple branding. So some businesses like to make sure that they kind of in one market are a lot of the different brands. So no matter which you buy, the profit's still going to the head company. So there are brands like Johnson and Johnson and like body wash, cosmetics, etc., where they own a lot of different ones. Things like Rexona, Lynx, and deodorants are all owned by the same company. So whichever one you buy, the money's still going to the same people. It's the same like in retail groups. So if you look at like menswear, Tarakash, YD, and Connor are all owned by the same parent company. So although you may go to one store and be like, I'm going to look in the other store to see if there's a better deal, the money's still going to the same person overall, regardless which store you go to. Used to the same. There used to be Rebel Sport and Amart Sport, and they were the same company. They had the same stock, really, pretty much. And so no matter which one you shopped at, the profit was still going to the same business. So by kind of owning the competition, the businesses trick you into shopping with them regardless, and then they still get the profit no matter what. All right, this has been a fairly long video, so I'm going to leave it at this. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave me a comment below, send me an email, all the usual stuff. I hope you're doing well. Hopefully this is 2021 when you're looking at this and not December 1st in my Christmas shirt while I'm doing it. Hope you're really enjoying economics to start off with, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.